the middle of the desert, about 40 minutes outside a city in the American Southwest, there is a village where roughly 400 people live in homes the size of a garden shed. Nearly all of them used to be homeless, and most are old enough to collect Social Security. Today, they pay around $500 a month, and they have a front porch, a mailbox, and neighbors who know their name. But when you look closely at what daily life inside this village is actually like, you find something far more complicated than the headlines suggest. The first thing that surprises you is the drive in. You leave the city, the strip malls and gas stations thin out, and for a long stretch, there is nothing but desert scrub, power lines, and distant mountains shimmering in the heat. Then, almost out of nowhere, you see it. Rows and rows of small, colorful houses arranged along gravel lanes, with shade sails stretched between them and solar panels glinting on the rooftops. There are raised garden beds with tomatoes and peppers growing in the desert sun. There are strings of lights hung between porches. From a distance, it looks like a little vacation resort. It is only when you get closer that you notice the details. The wheelchair ramps on almost every other home. The walkers parked by front doors. The community bulletin board with flyers for grief support groups and blood pressure checks. Because this is the second thing that surprises people. The average resident here is not who you picture when you hear the word homeless. Walk these gravel lanes in the early morning and you will see a 71-year-old woman in a sun hat watering her marigolds. You will see a Vietnam-era veteran in his 60s drinking coffee on his porch with an oxygen tank beside his chair. Homelessness in America is aging fast. When researchers at the University of California, San Francisco ran the largest study of homelessness in decades, they found that nearly half of older homeless adults lost their housing for the first time after the age of 50. These are people who worked their entire lives. They raised children. They paid taxes for 40 years. Then one thing went wrong. A husband died, and the survivor benefits didn't cover the rent. A hip surgery turned into medical debt. A landlord sold the building. And at 68 years old, on a fixed income of maybe $1,200 a month, there was simply no apartment left in America they could afford. Take a woman we will call Ruth. Ruth is 73. She spent 31 years working the front desk of a dental office, and if you passed her in a grocery store, you would never look twice. She and her husband rented the same little house for 2 decades, and between his pension and her Social Security, they were fine. Then he died of a heart attack on a Tuesday morning, and within a single year, everything unraveled. His pension stopped. The rent went up. Her own check came to about $1,400 a month, and the cheapest one-bedroom apartment anywhere near her old neighborhood was over $1,600. She sold her furniture. She moved into her Honda. She spent 8 months parking behind a church at night, washing her hair in gas station sinks, and telling her daughter on the phone that everything was fine. Ruth was never an addict. She never broke a law in her life. She simply outlived her husband in a country where that alone can put a widow on the street. Today, Ruth lives in a butter-yellow tiny home with a rocking chair on the porch, and she runs the village's Thursday quilting circle. A few lanes over from Ruth lives a man we will call Walter. Walter is 66, an Army veteran who came home decades ago with wounds nobody could see. He held jobs for a while, lost them, drifted, and spent the better part of 15 years cycling between shelters, sidewalks, and short stays in the county hospital. Veterans are heavily overrepresented among America's homeless, and villages like this one often reserve a whole section of homes just for them. When Walter first arrived, staff say he would not make eye contact with anyone. Now he runs the tool shed, and every new veteran who moves in gets a visit from Walter within the first week because he remembers exactly what that first night feels like. So what exactly does $500 a month buy you out here in the desert? Step inside one of these tiny homes and you can see the whole thing from the doorway. Most units are somewhere around 200 square feet. There is a real bed with real sheets, which sounds like a small thing until you remember that many residents spent years sleeping on concrete. There is a mini fridge, a microwave, a heater and air conditioner, a small table, and a window looking out at the mountains. Some units have their own small bathroom. Others share clean bathhouses and laundry rooms a short walk away. Cooking mostly happens in shared outdoor kitchens with long tables under shade structures, where the smell of someone's chili or fresh cornbread drifts down the lane around dinner time. And that shared kitchen turns out to matter more than the houses themselves. The people who design these villages, including a man named Alan Graham,
and somewhere around 60 missional neighbors that include adults and their children that live in the community. So we're coming close to 500 people.
Who built the famous Community First Village outside Austin, Texas, learned something the hard way over the years. If you give a chronically homeless person a private apartment in a regular building and close the door, many of them struggle badly. The isolation is crushing. Some quietly abandon the apartment and go back to the street, back to the only community they knew. So this village was deliberately built to make privacy possible, but isolation difficult. You have your own home and your own lock on your own door, but your kitchen, your laundry, your garden, and your mail are all shared. You cannot get through a single day here without bumping into another human being. A normal morning here starts early because desert summers demand it. By 6 in the morning, before the heat arrives, the lanes are already busy. There is a line of residents at the outdoor coffee station. There is an old man walking a small dog past the community garden. A groundskeeping crew made up entirely of residents is raking the gravel paths and watering the fruit trees. And this is where the village model gets interesting. Residents are not just allowed to work here, they are gently pushed toward it. There is an on-site woodworking shop where residents build furniture and birdhouses that get sold to visitors. There is an art studio where paintings made by formerly homeless artists sell for real money, and the artist keeps the profit. There is a small market, a laundry service, a car care station, and landscaping crews. None of it is forced labor, and none of it requires a resume or an interview. You show up, you work a few hours, and you get paid the same week. For someone who has been told for a decade that they are useless, earning $40 making cutting boards in a wood shop does something that no government check can do. It hands them back their dignity. Once a month, the village opens its gates for a public market day, and this might be the most remarkable few hours you can witness here. Visitors drive out from the city to buy handmade pottery, forged metal jewelry, wooden furniture, and jars of salsa grown in the community garden. And the people selling it, standing proudly behind their tables and counting out change, are the same men and women that shoppers once stepped over on downtown sidewalks. One resident artist, a woman in her 60s who spent years sleeping behind a laundromat, now sells her desert landscape paintings to collectors. And she will tell anyone who asks that the first painting she ever sold mattered more to her than the money ever could. It was the first time in 15 years that a stranger looked at something she made and called it beautiful. Evenings here have their own rhythm too. As the desert sun drops behind the mountains and the temperature finally breaks, the village comes back outside. There are dominoes and card games at the long tables under the string lights. On Friday nights, a bedsheet gets stretched across the side of the community hall, and a projector plays old movies while residents pass around bowls of popcorn. There is a small chapel with services on Sunday mornings, and a memorial garden with a stone for every resident who has passed away since the village opened, each name carved so it can never be forgotten. There is even a fire pit where, on cool nights, you will find a circle of people in their 60s and 70s telling stories, some funny, some so heavy they can only be spoken in the dark. Nobody here has to explain their past because everyone around the fire already understands it. But it would be dishonest to pretend that life here is a postcard because it is not. Rent is around $500 a month, and it actually has to be paid. Residents cover it through Social Security, disability benefits, veterans benefits, or the money they earn in the on-site jobs, and when someone falls behind, staff work with them. But the obligation is real. That is by design. The founders believe that paying rent, even modest rent, is part of being a neighbor rather than a patient. And then there is the harder truth. You are taking 400 people who have survived unimaginable trauma, addiction, mental illness, prison, and decades of street life, and you are asking them to live side by side in tiny homes a few feet apart. There are arguments over noise. There are feuds between neighbors that last months. There are relapses. There are ambulances in the night. Staff will tell you openly that this place is a neighborhood, and neighborhoods have problems. Some residents cannot adjust to rules and structure after years of total freedom, and they leave. A few end up back under the same overpasses they came from. The village does not hide this. They simply keep the porch light on, because many of those who leave eventually come back and try again. Now, before we go any further, I want to talk to some of you directly. Every time we cover a story like this one, the comments fill up with the same two kinds of messages. Widows and retirees who are a few $100s a month away from Ruth's story, and adult children trying to pull a parent back from that edge. If that is you, I put together a free guide called the Veterans Blueprint. It started with the programs that got men like Walter off the street, but it covers the same benefits, housing programs, and step-by-step moves that apply to seniors on Social Security too. It is linked in the description below this video. It costs nothing to look, and if any part of Ruth's story felt a little too familiar, please do not scroll past it. Now, back to the village. Because there is one question everyone asks about this place, and it deserves a real answer. Who actually pays for all this? $500 a month does not come close to covering what it costs to run a village of 400 people with case managers, health clinics, maintenance crews, and security. The honest answer is that donors cover most of the gap. Churches, foundations, retired couples who sponsor a single home, businesses that fund an entire lane of houses. And before anyone dismisses that as charity that lets the government off the hook, consider the math that made cities start paying attention. Researchers at the University of Pennsylvania followed thousands of chronically homeless people and found that each one cost the public roughly $40,000 a year in emergency room visits, ambulance rides, police calls, and nights in jail. Housing that same person in a supportive village costs a fraction of that. In other words, the cruelest option and the most expensive option turn out to be the same option. Compassion, in this case, is also the fiscally conservative position, which might be the only thing the left and the right quietly agree on. There is also a side of this story that rarely gets mentioned, and that is how hard it is to actually get in. The waiting list for a village like this can stretch for years. Outreach workers spend their days driving the city's underpasses and riverbeds, building trust with people one conversation at a time, because you cannot simply hand a chronically homeless person a brochure and expect them to show up. Priority usually goes to the people who have been outside the longest and are the most likely to die there, which means the village is deliberately choosing the hardest cases, not the easiest ones. Every success story you see on these gravel lanes was, statistically, the person least likely to make it. And the village does not run on staff alone. Every week, buses arrive carrying volunteers, church groups, and high school students who come to serve meals, teach painting classes, or just sit and play chess with someone. Many of them admit they showed up expecting to feel sorry for the residents and left feeling something closer to envy, because the sense of belonging here is stronger than anything in their own suburban neighborhoods, where people can live next to each other for 10 years without learning a name. That reaction is so common that some villages have started building homes for what they call missional neighbors, ordinary people who choose to move in on purpose. And what actually happens to people once they move in? Staff at villages like this one describe a pattern they see over and over. For the first few weeks, new residents barely leave their tiny home. Years on the street teach you that the world is dangerous and people are threats, and that lesson does not switch off just because you have a front door now. Then slowly, something shifts. They start sitting on the porch. Then they start answering when a neighbor says good morning. A few months in, they are playing dominoes at the outdoor tables, or tending a garden bed, or working shifts in the wood shop. Their blood pressure drops. They start taking their medications on schedule because there is a nurse who knows them by name. Some reconnect with children they have not spoken to in 20 years, and there are grandchildren who visit a tiny house in the desert to meet a grandmother they never knew they had. The great majority of people who move into villages like this one are still stably housed a year later, which, in the world of chronic homelessness, is close to miraculous. Doctors who work with this population will tell you that stable housing is, quite literally, medicine. Living on the street ages the human body brutally, and a homeless person in their 50s often has the health profile of someone in their 70s. Untreated diabetes, infected wounds, heart conditions that never see a cardiologist. Within the first year in the village, that trajectory bends. People sleep through the night for the first time in years. They eat regular meals. Chronic conditions that were spiraling in emergency rooms get managed quietly at the on-site clinic. Nurses here talk about residents who arrived in wheelchairs and, a year later, walk the garden loop every morning. Housing made none of them young again. Housing made healing possible. There is one resident story that staff at these villages tell more than any other, and versions of it exist in almost every community like this across the country. An elderly man moves in after more than a decade on the streets. For months, he is silent, guarded, invisible. Then one day, a neighbor gets sick, and this man quietly starts leaving food on her porch. Then he starts fixing bicycles for other residents. By the end of his first year, he is the unofficial mayor of his lane, the person new arrivals are sent to when they are scared. And when he eventually passes away, he does not die anonymous under a bridge, which is the ending the street had written for him. He dies in his own bed, in his own home, and the entire village turns out for his memorial in the little chapel. His name is carved into a stone in the garden. That, more than the solar panels or the garden beds, is what $500 a month actually buys in this village. It buys people a place to belong and eventually a place to be mourned. So what is it really like living in a $500 desert tiny home village with 400 formerly homeless people? It is smaller than you imagined and bigger than you imagined at the same time. It is a 200-square-foot house and a 40-acre family. It is arguments over loud music at midnight and casseroles left on porches when someone comes home from the hospital. It is proof that the opposite of homelessness was never really a house. The opposite of homelessness is community, and community, it turns out, can be built anywhere, even in the middle of a desert. If this story moved you, this channel tells the stories of ordinary people surviving an economy that has forgotten them, from seniors living in vans to entire towns rebuilding from nothing. Hit subscribe so the next one reaches you. And if you or someone you love is standing close to that edge, the free guide is waiting in the description below. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and I will see you in the next one.